Penny, I just so appreciate you opening up about your testimony, because I too, like an overcomer of child sexual abuse. And can you just talk a little bit about that trauma and just going through, because I think a lot of people, so many people in our country have identified and can say, I'm too, like I've walked through that. But what do we do to like walk through that pain, walk through that trauma? It's a really painful process. What does it look like, and why is it so important that we have to go there in order to get to the other side?
Yeah, I think one of the big things for me is I think in our society right now we have a lot of people that are playing the victim, and there is a difference between being victimized and something happening to you, and then allowing that to be your new identity and your role. And so for me, yes, my entire childhood I was sexually abused, and it was. I think the thing about it is confusing when you're a kid and things are being blamed on you. When I didn't want to go somewhere for Christmas, or I didn't want to be in these gatherings with, my grandfather, who was the one that did this, and, it was blamed on me. And when I came forward, the only reason I truly came forward is because I found out there were other people. Because I didn't think anybody was going to believe me. I didn't think that, the reason I was sexually abused is I didn't have people actually looking out for me. And a lot of times what happens is predators are really good at looking for people who are not covered. And I was not covered. And so I was easy target. I was easy prey. And I think you have to get to a point where you have to say, you know what, this may have happened. It hurt. I'm going to acknowledge it. But what I found is you're able to talk about things that no longer have you bound. And so when I started sharing my story, I started to watch all of these women and men. I think I was surprised, quite honestly, of how many men had been violated as well. And when I've started to poll audiences that I've been in, it's at least half the population in the room. And I think it's something that we should normalize talking about, not from the standpoint of making ourselves victims, because I believe we're victors through the blood of Jesus. I do not believe in taking on a victim mentality. I think that has crippled our world. But I do think that you can acknowledge what happened without making it your identity or your crutch.
Wow. Wow. And it's incredible how, like you say, how many have gone through this. But you, in a broader sense, with what you shared in the book, God was moving you to this place because you also suffered with emotional and even spiritual abuse of a kind with your mother, because there was problems, and then she got saved, and you think, well, okay, now everything's going to be better. And actually, in many ways, it was worse. Could you just speak to that?
Yeah, and I think narcissism is one of the most damaging things that I think is so destructive. And unfortunately, people tend to, when they're narcissistic, they look for positions of power, and sometimes those perceived positions of power can be in ministry. And that's exactly what my mother did. Is she then started using ministry to try to manipulate me and to control me. And I mean, I remember there would be times where I would come home and she would come and give me a "thus saith the Lord. I know you've been doing drugs. The Lord has told me." And I'm like, okay, I have never done drugs in my life. You're not telling the truth. That's when I knew that things were, I started as a teenager really waking up to a lot of things, and I started going, man, she's crazy. Like, even, and if I would try to say, you're not listening to God. Oh, I listen to God and I read my Bible every day. You don't get to speak. And she started using Christianity to try to manipulate me. And so in the early days, I was a bit turned off. I mean, I loved God, but I was turned off by her. And I think that's why today, I have a pretty high meter for the fakers, because my radar starts going off. I'm like, listen, if you just can't be real and true and open and honest, I'm going to sniff you out. It's not going to work too well. You're probably not going to like me, because I grew up, my sniff meter for that kind of thing. I can tell it pretty easily. And so I think for me, I love God with all my heart, but I was able to thankfully divide out um, who God really was, aside from some people who said this is who God is. And I think that's what gets some people in trouble as young kids. They grow up with certain things in their heart and they're blaming it on God when it actually wasn't God. It was a poor leader.